Well, film can do a lot of things. It can either just show it and just have it be that, where you can make it an entertainment piece like Network or something like that, or you can just, our Sweet Smell of Success, films that I quite admire. We just show what power looks like and you have fun with it.
I used to think my father was the strongest man in the world, until I discovered what he had been hiding in the confidential files of the Los Angeles Police Department. That sentence, taken from an audio recording found among the final notes of David James Redford, the son of Hollywood legend Robert Redford, shocked the entire industry. The man America idolized as a symbol of integrity, a champion of environmental causes, a model father, was not as flawless as the public believed. In his final words, David revealed a series of staggering truths, secret LAPD files that had monitored his father for years, hidden relationships that nearly destroyed the family, undisclosed illnesses that drove him into seclusion, and even a missing document that could forever alter how the world saw Robert Redford. There were also details that David admitted made me realize I no longer recognized my own father. So why did it take David until the end of his life to speak out? Let's uncover the story. 1. I once thought the greatest darkness in my father's life came from roles he never completed. But in truth, it came from the places he hid himself away from the camera. That afternoon, inside the old storage room of the Sundance Institute in Utah, where thousands of reels and documents chronicled cinema's history, David was researching material for his documentary Digital Privacy: The Illusion of Freedom. Autumn sunlight streamed through the dusty window, glinting off boxes stacked with forgotten files. When he pulled out a yellowed cardboard box, he froze at the label on the corner Los Angeles Police Department confidential file, ADI 4472, Robert Redford. His heartbeat quickened as if he had just touched a secret someone had tried to bury for half a century. In 1973, Hollywood was reeling from scandals, anti-war protests, and the political aftershocks of Watergate. During that period, the Los Angeles Police Department established a covert division called the Confidential Intelligence Unit, tasked with monitoring public figures who might influence public opinion. According to a 2022 Radar Online investigation, the watch list included major names: Jane Fonda, Jack Nicholson, Steve McQueen, and notably Robert Redford, the rising star of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid 1969, and The Sting 1973. One of the documents David found was a short typewritten report containing only a few lines. Subject: Robert Redford suspected of subversive behavior and possible ties to anti-government movements. Monitoring to include private residence social events and sexual conduct. David wrote in his journal, "My hands trembled when I read the words sexual conduct. All my life I thought my father hated scandal. Why then was he being watched for his private life?" Another section of the file described in detail Redford's Beverly Hills residence on Hillcrest Road. A hand-drawn floor plan marked mic line points, indicating wiretaps placed through phone cables in the summer of 1974. The second page chilled David further. Multiple female visitors identified. Subjects include actresses and socialites. No evidence of narcotics, but alcohol consumption frequent. In his diary, David wrote, "I remember the nights my mother cried in her room, and my father said it was just tabloid nonsense." Now, I'm not so sure, maybe she already knew what I've only just discovered. Another report referenced an apartment at 1133 Sunset Boulevard leased under the name of Redford's production company, Golden West Productions, but registered by his assistant. The police note read, "Suspect uses location for private meetings. Subject seen arriving after 10 p.m., leaving before dawn." David visited the address in 2016. In a recording sent to a friend, he described, The place is now just a block of gray bricks windows rusted overlooking traffic. I stood there and thought maybe this was where my father lived his other nights, where he wasn't Robert Redford, the world's idol, but just a man hiding from his own reflection. By the mid-1970s, Robert Redford was being hailed by the media as Hollywood's moral compass. Time magazine in 1974 featured him on its cover with that very title. Ironically, that same year, the police listed him as a long-term surveillance subject. The reason was political. Redford had publicly opposed the Vietnam War and supported environmental movement stances that the government saw as left-leaning and un-American. Some reports even suggested Redford had funded independent filmmakers accused of anti-establishment activity. The moral hero image, it seemed, was only a shell. Behind it, Redford lived with fear of being watched, betrayed, or exposed. When David found these files, he was 53, battling liver disease and recovering from a bone marrow transplant. In an audio note recovered after his death, he said hoarsely, "I grew up believing my father never lied." But these papers, they tell the story of a man living two lives. He scanned the entire file, saving it under a folder titled Father's Shadows. From then on, David began his own quiet investigation, trying to understand why the man he loved and admired most had been tracked like a criminal. The last line in his notebook was both sorrowful and profound. "My father lived in two worlds, one for the public and one for those brave enough to see who he really was." On David's desk, police later found a final photograph of Robert Redford stepping out of a silver Cadillac face, frozen in the glare of camera flashes outside the Sunset apartment. Beneath it, David had written in black ink, "From here, everything began to fall apart." And as he said from those files, David traced the true reason the Redford family had fractured. The women mentioned in those reports weren't just colleagues or friends. They were the beginning of a years-long tragedy. 2. I don't hate my father for those women. I just regret that to make the world see a perfect Robert Redford, he forced our family to live with what was left. In 1966, before he became a legend, Robert Redford was 30 years old, fresh off Broadway, with that cool stare Hollywood called the perfect American look. That same year, he landed the lead role in This Property is Condemned, a Paramount production filmed in New Orleans. His co-star was Natalie Wood, already an A-list actress, and the wife of famed screenwriter Robert Wagner. The heat on set was as heavy as the Mississippi air. Natalie and Redford often stayed late after filming, reviewing scripts, laughing until midnight. A lighting technician later told Cinemagic Weekly in 1983, "There was something magnetic between them. When the director yelled, 'Cut!' they kept looking at each other as if the scene wasn't over." Rumors spread across Hollywood after a Los Angeles Herald-Examiner reporter spotted them leaving the set together at midnight unaccompanied. A grainy photo captured Redford opening a car door for Natalie, his hand lightly on her shoulder. They disappeared into the night, and by morning Redford returned to the hotel alone, face unreadable. While tabloids exploded with headlines of on-screen romance turned real, Redford stayed silent. He never confirmed or denied anything. Natalie, ever composed under the spotlight, said nothing either. But the crew whispered that after the final shoot, Redford had given her a postcard with just 4 words, "You deserved more." 7 years later, Hollywood buzzed again, this time about Redford and Barbra Streisand in The Way We Were, 1973. The film told of a turbulent romance between an activist and a charming man, a story mirroring Redford's real life. On screen, their chemistry was electric. Off-screen rumors claimed it continued after filming. In May 1973, The Hollywood Reporter ran a brief piece. An insider reveals Streisand and Redford have been meeting privately at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Redford is said to be helping Streisand through her marriage crisis with John Peters. No proof ever surfaced, but the gossip was enough. Lola Van Vagen and Redford's wife packed up their 3 children and left for Utah for several months. In a letter David later found among old drawers, she had written, "You say you love me, but the photos tell another story." David recalled in his last recording, "I remember my mother crying every night, and my father saying it was just work." I believed him then. But after reading the police files, I know they weren't wrong. That same year, Time magazine described Redford as the man every woman wants and every man wants to be. What sounded like praise felt more like a curse to David. Behind the image of fidelity and integrity was a man trapped by his own legend. In Father's Shadows, David wrote, "I no longer know what was real. My father always smiled for the camera, always held my mother's hand when the press was there." But the letters and notes in those files show he lived 2 parallel lives, one for the world and one for the women he hid. Colleagues who worked with Redford confirmed his irresistible charm. Actress Jane Fonda, his co-star in The Electric Horseman, 1979, said in an interview with Vanity Fair, "Redford could make you believe he'd love you forever just by looking at you for 5 seconds. Then he'd turn away, and you'd be left with emptiness." Redford's PR team was known for being impeccable. Every rumor vanished within days. Reporters were paid off, articles withdrawn, and the perfect man image remained intact. But within the Redford household, the cracks widened. By the 1980s, as Redford immersed himself in major projects like Ordinary People 1980 and Out of Africa 1985, Lola drifted further away. After 27 years of marriage, they divorced. The court papers cited only irreconcilable differences, but David knew the real cause was the silence between the camera flashes. To the world, Robert Redford remained untarnished, a man of grace and principle. But to David, he was the father whose every appearance on screen reopened old wounds. He once wrote to a friend, "I love my father, but I cannot love the image the world worships. That man is not him." And so those secret relationships and nights hidden in the Beverly Hills apartment became the first cracks that splintered the Redford family. From there, David understood to preserve perfection, his father had sacrificed truth, and over time that truth turned into the shadow that engulfed them all. 3. All his life, he tried to prove he was the perfect man, and that very effort kept him from being his true self. In the late 1970s, when Robert Redford was at the height of his fame with All the President's Men, 1976. Confidential, a magazine notorious for digging into stars' private lives, suddenly ran a shocking piece titled "The Secret Side of Hollywood's Golden Man." According to an anonymous source in the article during the filming of Downhill Racer 1969 in Tyrol, Austria, Redford had a special close relationship with a male Austrian photographer. The article claimed the two often spent private time together at the Hintertuck ski area, took photos together, dined together, and often left the hotel at the same time. There was no concrete evidence, but Confidential described a star who made every woman swoon, yet had the gentlest eyes when speaking to men. The piece was pulled from newsstands after only 3 days due to legal pressure from Universal Pictures, with whom Redford had an exclusive contract. But in Hollywood circles, the story spread faster than any wildfire. David recalled in an audio note he saved in 2016. "I remember the first time I read that piece in the archives. No one in the family mentioned it. But in the police files, there was an entry, 'Sexual conduct unconfirmed photographs.' When I saw those pictures, I couldn't breathe. The photos were clipped inside a brown envelope showing Redford smiling against a snowy backdrop. Beside him was a dark-haired man, whose gaze toward Redford held an unusual warmth. Nothing explicit, nothing beyond a look, but that look made David realize his father might have hidden a part of his true self. In his notebook, Father's Shadows, he wrote, "I don't know if it was love or just a moment of freedom, but for the first time I realized my father wasn't the iron figure he wanted us to believe. He was afraid of being seen. In an era when Hollywood still followed rigid molds, male actors had to be strong, charming. Never soft, that rumor cut into the golden man image Redford had built for 2 decades. At post-Oscar parties, whispers began calling him the Golden Mask, a gilded face hiding a deeper fear." A veteran Variety reporter who had covered Redford for years recalled Redford was always courteous and proper, but sometimes overly guarded. He let no one into his private life. We joked that if there was a secret in Hollywood, no one knew it must be hiding behind Robert Redford's eyes. According to a note in an LAPD file in April 1978, the department received a 35mm roll of film sent anonymously, containing private photographs of Redford and an unknown man allegedly taken in Tyrol, Austria. Most were blurry but clear enough for police to file them under special monitoring. When the studio was alerted, the entire file was retrieved, but a copy remained in the packet David found nearly 40 years later. Around the same time, Redford began to change. He made fewer party appearances, refused to answer questions about his personal life, and became increasingly private. At a press conference for Ordinary People 1980, a reporter asked bluntly, "Is it true you were once rumored to have a same-sex relationship?" Redford only smiled and replied briefly, "People can say whatever they want. My job is to make films, not to explain who I am." That answer sounded definitive, but to David it was another sign. In a journal entry dated 9/14/2015, he wrote, "My father wasn't angry when asked. He was sad. I think he was tired of playing the perfect man for too long." Close friends of Redford alluded to the same thing. In a 2002 interview, cinematographer Michael Chapman revealed Robert keeps everything inside. He fears that if anyone sees him vulnerable, the image will collapse. He once said, "If they knew who I really am, they wouldn't forgive me." Rumors about Redford's orientation were never confirmed, yet they lingered like a shadow behind him. Throughout the 1980s, 1990s, Hollywood indulged a frenzy over celebrities' private lives, and whenever someone mentioned Redford's untold secrets, the stories vanished within hours. No one knew why. Perhaps a powerful PR team, or perhaps Redford himself had learned to manage the media better than anyone. For David, the torment wasn't that his father had once been rumored about, it was how he chose to face it. In a final letter to a close friend, David wrote, "Maybe my father was never what they said, but I believe he carried a kind of loneliness only those who must hide their nature can understand." In his later years, Redford lived quietly at a ranch in Utah, far from cameras, spending time painting and walking with his wife, Sibylle Sagers. Yet, according to David, that quiet wasn't peace. It was the trace of a man worn out from playing the lead in his own life. He wrote, "My father told me, 'You know, sometimes you don't have to lie. If you stay quiet long enough, the truth disappears.'" Perhaps that silence made Robert Redford a legend, and also left him solitary to the end. To the world, he was a moral emblem, a cinematic hero. To David, he was a man imprisoned for half a century by his own image. And when David closed the last file, he knew the story wasn't over. Because beyond the private rumors and identity questions, something haunted him even more. The quiet illnesses that tormented Robert Redford in the shadows, the real reason he withdrew from Hollywood. 4. Hollywood called my father a man of steel, but I know inside he was full of fractures. In his 2017 journal, David wrote, "I once saw my father trembling as he climbed the stairs, yet he always smiled and said, 'Just tired.' Now I understand it wasn't fatigue. It was endurance." From childhood, Robert Redford was frailer than other kids. Born in 1936 in Santa Monica, he grew up in a time when America was still haunted by polio. In 1947, at 11, Redford was diagnosed with a mild form that left his left leg weaker. In a rare 1999 Vanity Fair interview, Redford said simply, "I was sick as a kid, but I learned to run faster than my fear." He never mentioned it again. But according to classmates, whenever he played baseball, Redford hit a small steel brace inside his pant leg. The blonde boy spent months relearning how to walk, clenching his teeth so he wouldn't be called crippled, the nickname neighborhood kids once gave him. Perhaps that's when he learned the most important art of his life, masking pain with a smile. When Redford entered Hollywood, his fragility seemed to vanish under the lights. Few knew that for endurance-heavy scenes like the mountain climbs in Jeremiah Johnson 1972 or the grueling sequences in Downhill Racer, he often relied on painkillers just to move normally. A crew member recalled, "Between takes, he'd clench his fists so hard his knuckles turned white. But when the camera lit up, he smiled as if nothing had happened." That sacrifice made Redford a symbol of strength, but it also quietly damaged his body. By the early 1990s, Redford began facing serious skin issues. After decades of outdoor shoots from Colorado's snowfields to Utah's deserts, he believed sunlight kept him looking healthy. But according to sources like Hollywood Life and The List in 1992, Redford was diagnosed with skin cancer melanoma on his nose. Doctors recommended surgery to remove the tissue, but Redford refused to make it public because he didn't want illness to become a headline. A family friend recalled Robert always said he wanted people to remember the films, not the sickness. He entered hospitals through back doors, always wore a wide-brim hat, and never allowed photographs. The surgery succeeded, but small scars remained on his cheekbones. To hide them, he grew a beard and joked it was a new style. To those close to him, it was a clear sign his health was ebbing. The skin condition was only the beginning. In the 2000s, rumors spread that Redford had liver issues, possibly familial, as his son David had undergone 2 transplants. The List and People both noted that Redford looked unusually pale at a Sundance event in 2005. In a letter to a friend, David wrote, "I asked if he was okay. He just said, 'I'm fine, son. I just need rest.' But I saw his hands shake and his eyes no longer had the old light." As David's liver problems worsened, Redford rarely left the Utah ranch. He set up a small room with windows facing the valley where father and son drank tea each morning. David said he wanted fresh air, but I knew he no longer had the strength to fly anywhere. According to a former housekeeper, the 2010s were years when Redford lived like a hermit. Each morning, he stepped onto the porch, looked toward the Wasatch Range, then returned to his desk to write a few lines in a small notebook. Some days, he could barely hold a pen. The hand that once gripped a steering wheel and a camera now trembled like that of a man 20 years older. That condition gradually drew him from public life. At his last Sundance appearance in 2018, he looked markedly thinner, walked more slowly, his voice rough and uneven. When pressed about health rumors, he only smiled. "I just want a little rest. Everyone has to stop at some point." But to David, that was a kind lie, a way his father hid the truth that his body was failing. In a final letter to a close friend, David wrote, "I know he hurt, but he never complained." he chose silence, as if pain were just part of the craft. The illness forced Redford to face his greatest fear, losing control. All his life, he lived to control roles, lights his image. Illness took away command over his own body. Each step became a trial. Each look in the mirror forced him to meet a face unlike before. And perhaps that is the real reason he left Hollywood, a place where the gaze is too bright and there is no room for weakness. The housekeeper said that in his final nights, Redford often sat alone on the porch, played old jazz records, and gazed out over the snowy valley. Once she heard him murmur, "All my life I tried to spare others from worry, but in the end, it was the silence that made me lonely." For David, that is the most haunting image, the father the world exalted, as Hollywood's Man of Steel was, in truth, only a weary body battling for each breath. 5. My father always said truth was dangerous, now I understand, because he spent his life running from it. In his final years, David Redford grew frail from illness, yet he never stopped writing. Each day, inside a sunlit room on the family ranch in Utah, he opened old boxes of notes, carefully recording every detail and memory of his father. In March 2018, while nearing completion of his final documentary project, David sent his collaborator a brief email containing only 6 words. "I found the 1975 notebook." No one knows exactly what happened afterward. But in the audio tapes, David left behind, his trembling voice can be heard whispering, "If what's in that notebook is true, then everything we believed about my father was a lie." Robert Redford was known for his meticulous journaling. From the start of his career, he carried a leather-bound notebook everywhere, jotting down ideas, dialogue, and quiet observations. But the 1975 notebook was different. It wasn't about work. It was the only one he kept locked away, untouched by anyone, not even his wife or children. According to David, the notebook was written between 1974 and 1975 during a time when Redford faced an LAPD investigation while his career was soaring. In a tape dated May 4, 2018, David said, "My father once told me 1975 was the year he almost lost everything. That notebook holds what he feared most, the deals, the meetings that were never meant to be spoken of." From the documents David gathered, he believed the notebook detailed shadowy encounters with Hollywood power brokers, suggesting that Redford made compromises to protect his image amid the investigation. Some pages were smudged, yet one line remained legible. "No one can know what we traded. Reputation is a currency too." In his own journal, David wrote, "Maybe he traded something, a person or a secret. But without a doubt, he paid a price to preserve the image America worshipped." In May 2018, David visited the family archives in Provo, Utah, which stored all of Redford's scripts, photos, and personal memorabilia. He was accompanied by cinematographer Greg Ricketson. In a 2021 interview with the Salt Lake Tribune, Greg recalled, "We opened every box, but the notebook wasn't there. All that remained was a torn leather cover, some ash stuck inside, and a first page scrawled with the words, 'They knew everything.'" They photographed the page, but when Greg returned the next day, both the cover and the scrap were gone. No one knew who had taken them. Other sources, including a 2022 article from The Guardian, claimed that Redford destroyed the notebook in 1990, just before founding the Sundance Institute. A former employee said Robert burned a pile of old papers in his backyard. When I asked, he told me, "Some memories shouldn't come back to life." If that was true, the 1975 notebook may have turned to ashes 3 decades earlier. Yet its contents seemed to survive as fragments of sentences appeared in David's surviving materials, phrases filled with guilt and dread. One read, "We silenced them before they could talk. It was the only way. No one knows who they were." Some say journalists investigating a wiretapping scandal in Beverly Hills. Others believe it referred to crew members who witnessed Redford signing a private agreement with police and studios to end the probe. For David, the notebook became an obsession. He spent his final months chasing its truth. In an audio clip from July 12, 2020, just 3 months before his passing, his voice, frail but determined, said, "I used to think my father defended justice. But if his notes were true, he defended himself, not the truth." Friends said David was tormented by that realization. He suffered nightmares, often waking in terror, shouting they knew everything. He feared someone was watching him, that his own notes would vanish like his father's. On October 16, 2020, David Redford passed away after a long battle with bile duct cancer. On his desk lay a single thin file marked D1. On its last page, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "Some truths are not meant to be told." But silence is worse. Beneath it, a trembling signature, DJ Redford. Years later, when the press asked Robert Redford about the 1975 notebook, he never spoke of it. He only said once in a rare New Yorker interview in 2019, "I've lived long enough to know that truth doesn't always set you free. Sometimes it just makes everything heavier." No one knows exactly what he meant. But those who heard David's final recordings believe the notebook held something that could shatter the image of a legend. Because as David's final words declared, "There are truths meant to die with my father." That was the line that ended all his tapes, his voice fading into the sound of wind blowing through a Utah window. There was no anger left, only sorrow. And from that moment, Hollywood began to sense that behind Robert Redford's gentle smile, behind decades of golden light and heroic roles, was a man burdened by secrets too heavy to speak. So was the 1975 notebook real, or the fevered vision of a dying son? If it existed, did Robert Redford destroy it to save his reputation or to shield an entire generation of power in Hollywood? No answer has ever been found. But one thing remains certain: when David Redford closed his eyes for the last time, he took with him one of Hollywood's deepest secrets. He always told me that people are flawed, but silence can destroy the soul. Those were the final words David left in his own notebook, part reproach, part forgiveness. Now that both father and son are gone, their story still chills Hollywood. The sealed files, the vanished journal, the blurred photographs, the half-confessions together, they form a portrait full of contradictions. Was screen hero Robert Redford truly the pure symbol America adored, or merely a golden mask hiding its darkness? And why only at the end did David Redford finally find the courage to speak? Perhaps because in the world of fame and light, truth will always be the most dangerous thing of all. If this story makes you reflect on what hides behind the spotlight on those who seem perfect but aren't, click like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We'll continue bringing you hidden files, forgotten confessions, and untold truths about the legends Hollywood tried to erase. Because here, every glow has its shadow, and you deserve to know the truth.